Oh, hello there. I'm doing that thing where I pretend I didn't see you there. You know, sort of to break down a theoretical barrier between viewer and presenter. Video games are great, aren't they? They let you go on magical adventures, drive fast cars. Some of them even let you own a home and have a working family unit. They're amazing. One of my favourite types of games is adventure games, and one of the earliest ones that ever caught my attention and really gripped me was Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening on the Game Boy. I thought on today's Mellow Gaming Recommends we'll take a look at that. We'll check out its history, how the game was made, the story to it, and maybe later on we'll be joined by Eric from Game vs Game, who will tell us how the game developed later on in life. So why don't we sit back and see how that goes. We all know about The Legend of Zelda, a series that first appeared on the Famicom Disk System with the original Legend of Zelda in 1986, and was later ported to the Nintendo Entertainment System. A sequel, The Adventure of Link, was released in 1987, which went in a different direction to the first game with side-scrolling action scenes and a different take on the overworld. In 1991, one of the finest games in the series was released on the Super Nintendo. That game was The Legend of Zelda Link to the Past. This game built upon elements of the previous two entries and pushed the series into more of a linear story-driven adventure route. It became the template for the majority of the future games in the franchise. In the early 90s, some Nintendo staff would often stay after hours to work on prototypes and ideas for games. It was at this after hours club that a developer named Kazuaki Morita made a prototype for a Zelda-style game just to see if it was possible on the Game Boy. A game was released in Japan only in 1992 that managed just that, called Kairu no Tame Nikane wa Naru, also known as The Frog for Whom the Bell Tolls. The engine from that game would be adapted to eventually be used as the basis for Link's Awakening, but not before the game went through a period where it was actually going to be a full port of the Super Nintendo's Link to the Past. That game would eventually get a handheld port in 2002 for the Game Boy Advance. It was in this process of attempting to port the game to the Game Boy that the game director Takashi Tezuka decided that it would be more interesting to create something original. He sought permission to develop a full Zelda game for the Game Boy, and Link's Awakening officially entered development.
Hi, Rick Mail here. I don't know if you're like me, immensely rich, talented, handsome. Isn't it a bore? Well, I found the answer. Zelda Link's Awakening from Nintendo. You play a medieval elf named Link.
You travel through many worlds, meeting endless characters on your eternal adventures.
So hey, next time you're Rick Mail, why not try Zelda Link's Awakening? I think you'll like it. Ciao.
Zelda, an involved and inexhaustible Nintendo.
The game has a bit of a different feel to previous entries in the series with its idiosyncratic tone and characters. Tezuka once described it as being almost a parody of Zelda games with the frequent appearances of characters from other Nintendo properties. Apparently Tezuka never checked if it was okay to include characters from games like Mario, Kirby and the previously mentioned Kairu no Tame Nikane wa Naru, but they thought it'd be fun to include them, so they did. Whilst it does certainly have a sense of humour, the game does have a plot that's philosophically pretty heavy. Before I get into that story, I'm going to tell you about my experiences with the first portable outing in the Legend of Zelda series. I got Link's Awakening for my 12th birthday back in 1994. I'd received the Game Boy the previous Christmas, and by June I was raring to get something new to play on it. My dad took me to the Derby Toys R Us to pick out a present for myself, and it didn't take me long to make a beeline to the games aisle and grab one of them yellow tickets Toys R Us used to use for games. I played the game solidly for months, but never actually managed to finish it for quite some time after. There's a few moments in the game where, despite there being handy hint-giving phone booths, it's fairly easy to lose track of where you're going or how to proceed. Pretty typical for back then though. I believe that eventually I started over on a new file called Smeg, as was my naming convention back then. I was a very big fan of Red Dwarf, and after exploring every inch of the game's map, finding many seashells and secrets, I completed the story and the game instantly became one of my all-time favourites. In sheer nostalgia terms, this is my favourite Legend of Zelda game. There's maybe 2 or 3 other games in the series that I'd call the best, but this one has a place in my heart like no other Zelda game does. I knew what I'd played was special, and even now, having just finished the original version of the game for the first time in what must be at least 25 years, it still feels special. Oh, and that Smeg file? Still on my cart. So why did this little black and white Zelda game resonate with me so much? I think it's because it's one of the first games I ever played that made me realise that games can make you think. Up to this point, the most complex a storyline had ever gotten in a game I'd played was Go Save Princess, and there's not even a princess in this game. Like, Zelda isn't even here. Well, not actual Zelda, there's a bit more complex than that. Before Breath of the Wild came along and shook up the Zelda formula a few years ago, one of the main criticisms of the series was how rigidly it would follow the same formula. You know the one, Ganon threatens Hyrule, Link battles for 8 dungeons, Zelda is involved to some degree, there's a Triforce, that sort of thing. Link's Awakening was still fairly early on in the series' lifespan, and it fully eschewed many of the elements that were already series tropes. You still play as Link and there's still 8 dungeons, but there's no Ganon, no Triforce, no Hyrule, and as mentioned, no Zelda. The game takes place on the island of Koholint after Link's boat is wrecked in a storm, and he washes up on its shores. He is found by a young familiar-looking woman called Marin and taken into her home to recover. Your arrival on the island seems like a big deal for Marin, as she appears to have no idea of what exists beyond the island itself, almost like there isn't anything else. You soon meet a talking owl who tells you the only way off the island is to awaken the windfish that's sleeping in a giant egg on top of a mountain. You battle through the already obligatory 8 dungeons, defeating bosses that are referred to as nightmares. What an odd name for a boss. At least it would be if this wasn't for the revelation in the second half of the game that the island of Koholint is all part of a dream. Whose dream though? You're told it's the dream of the windfish, but that Marin sure looks like Zelda, and this whole formula does seem at least somewhat familiar. 8 dungeons, 8 monsters, a big bad to defeat to free everyone. Taking the place of collecting pieces of the Triforce is the rounding up of 8 special musical instruments that will play a song to awaken the windfish. It's made pretty clear that doing so will not only wake up the sleeping deity, but will also cause Koholint to cease to exist. Everyone on the island will disappear, and who's to say you'll even remember them when you're free of the island? I say free of the island. I'm sure you've figured out that this is all Link's dream. It's a pretty big philosophical conflict to be in this handheld adventure game. Like, all these people seem to exist, the entire game world isn't just the world you play in, but it is, for all these characters, all there is. They literally know nothing of any outside world because there isn't one. They exist because you, as Link, imagined them in your mind as you're passed out somewhere in the ocean. Your entire purpose as the fabled hero of time is to save and protect lives, and here you're tasked with ending the existence of a whole island's worth of people. They may not physically exist, but they sure seem real to you. Marin dreams of becoming a bird so she can fly away from the island and find somewhere new. By waking the windfish, you'll be ending that dream of hers. Pretty heavy stuff, unless you're the type who doesn't care because they're just figments of your imagination. Now, for 12-year-old me, this was pretty big thinking stuff. It's all about perception being a reality and how we see the world through a lens that we perceive it through. You know, the world is one way, but maybe we see it as something else. For example, that blue and black dress that went all around the internet a while ago. Or was it white and gold? I don't know, I could see both, to be honest. Or for another example, this Game Boy I've been playing on the whole time. It isn't even switched on. It doesn't even work. The music you're hearing is not even from Link's Awakening, and this game cart, it's not Zelda, it's Batman. When this game was released, it received almost universal praise, and still does to this day. It often appears in various publications' top 10 Zelda games lists, and even has been regarded as one of the 50 most important and influential games of all time by the Guinness Book of Records. Like I said earlier, I regard it as one of the best in the series and one of my favourite games of all time. But, did you know? Some people had a criticism of the game upon release. A criticism other than the slightly awkward nature of having to switch items so often because there was only 2 face buttons on a Game Boy. Some out there criticised the game for having dull monochromatic palette. Now I don't agree with this, I mean it is monochrome, I agree with that, I just think the game looks swell. That said, Nintendo clearly took this to heart, and a few years later, when the Game Boy Color's release was on the horizon, Nintendo chose to take a second look at Link's Awakening and create a DX version full of colours and other new features. Now, if only I knew someone who was an expert at taking one game and another game and pitting them against each other in a game versus game like scenario. And what if his name was Eric?
I can't explain it. It's like somewhere out there's a British person thinking about me. Strange. I best get back to playing Link's Awakening DX and speaking out loud about all the things that have changed from the original for no reason. Well, obviously it's in color. The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening DX, as Nintendo liked to name their deluxe color ports at the time, was released shortly after the Game Boy Color's release as an enhanced port of one of their flagship Game Boy titles, just in time for the Christmas rush in December of 1998 in Japan and North America, but not until January 1999 in the UK. So of course, the biggest change here is the colorization of the original 4 grays of the Game Boy, but it goes beyond that, introducing exclusive content to take advantage of some of the unique features that the Game Boy Color provided, which we'll come back to those after we talk about some of the more subtle changes. There's not many, but it seems Nintendo took the opportunity to both introduce some variety for players who were already familiar with the original, and some small tweaks to enhance the overall experience for all players. For the returning player, a handful of the dungeon chests have had their contents shuffled around, which doesn't have a major impact on the game overall, but it is nice to not have an exact copy of the original. The most common thing to get relocated is either the dungeon map or the hint slab, which actually isn't a stone anymore. It's a beak! Yes, all the hint stones have been redesigned to look like an owl missing its beak. The reason for this, aside from the running franchise theme of wise owls, is that most dungeons now have additional hint owls. So instead of a stone slab with part of a hint scratched on it that somehow makes another hint stone legible, you're now giving a magic talking wall owl its mouth to talk its owly hints at you. Not creepy at all. Now for the big stuff, the exclusive stuff. First is the photographer. A mouse who gives you a photo album and starts you on a side quest to uncover photo ops hidden throughout the world. He'll turn up and offer to take your picture, which, if you agree, you can store up to 12 photos in your album and print them at any time on your Game Boy printer. Unfortunately, I don't have one, and that's a USB cable. Second is a completely optional color dungeon. You can access this dungeon after completing the Bottle Grotto, collecting the Power Bracelet, and returning Bow Wow to his owner. Once you're in, the game actually tests you to determine if you're playing on a Game Boy Color or not. The reason being, since Link's Awakening DX was released on this black backward compatible cartridge, rather than the clear Game Boy Color exclusive cartridge, you could still play it on your older hardware in black and white. And this dungeon and its puzzles rely heavily on color, as the name would imply. So playing in black and white would absolutely ruin the experience. One case where gatekeeping is actually okay. Once you complete this dungeon, you have the option to take either the blue or red mail, which permanently grants you the power of a guardian acorn or a piece of power respectively. Dash in a few bug fixes, enemy tweaks, bug unfixes, minor geography alterations, and some text updates, and that's Link's Awakening DX in a nutshell. Wherever you are, British guy, thanks for thinking of me.
Well, that daydream worked out well, didn't it? Thanks, Eric. It's fun comparing iterations of the same game. Speaking of, back in February of this year, that year being 2019 for those of you in the future, Nintendo announced that a full remake of Link's Awakening would be coming to the Switch. I've got to admit I'm pretty hyped for this one. This sort of style of Zelda game has mostly been kept to handheld Nintendo consoles over the years, with the home consoles getting more third-person focused games that build off Ocarina of Time's legacy. Granted, the Switch is a handheld too, but it's a hybrid console that can be played on a TV, and I imagine that's how I'll be playing it mostly. In order to add a little more value to this remake, Nintendo are including a few extra features like amiibo support and, for the first time in the series, a dungeon creation mode. As you play the game, you'll be unlocking new dungeon rooms to piece together to create your own custom dungeons, which feels just one step away from the Zelda Maker game I'd love to see be a thing. The remake of Link's Awakening will be released on the 20th of September 2019, which is hopefully after I get this video released. So that's Link's Awakening, one of my favourite games of all time. The only re-release of this game over the years was back in 2011 when the DX version was released on the 3DS Virtual Console. Unless you'd rather get the cart, which will set you back about 15 to 25 quid for the original, and in the region of 30 to 50 for the DX release, the 3DS Virtual Console may be your only chance. That version is just £5.39, which is well worth getting at that price. With the remake nearly here though, maybe you'd want to play that to experience the dream world of Koholint Island in lovely colourful HD. And that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and a big thanks to Eric from Game vs Game for his look into the DX release of Link's Awakening. Make sure to go over to his channel and do a subscribe. He recently released an epic video on the various ports of Rayman 2, so check that out. There'll be a link on the end slate and in the description. Please do comment below and let me know what Zelda game has been the most nostalgic for you. I promise not to tell you you're wrong if you pick one of the CDI games. I mean, you are wrong, but I just won't say you are in the comments. Thanks also to my Patreon backers whose names will be appearing on screen right about now. I'll see you next time when I'll be returning to Animal Crossing for the first time in 5 years to give it the Mellow Gaming Recommends treatment. Goodbye and sweet dreams.